I was the only one who said no. We all lived together in that oversized, overpriced New York apartment with cracked ceilings and dreams that felt heavier than our suitcases. Emily, Brooke, and I had come to the city chasing the same thing: runways, casting calls, and our faces on billboards instead of subway ads. When Emily announced she had gotten an Ozempic prescription, it felt less like a medical decision and more like a career move. They asked me if I wanted in. I told them no. I said I wanted to do this the slow way, the normal way. Emily laughed and said normal was for girls who did not make it. At first, it looked harmless. Emily and Brooke decided to share the prescription to save money. They made a chart on the fridge with days, doses, and target weights written in red marker. They called it accountability. They said it was support. I watched them inject each other in the bathroom mirror like it was some twisted bonding ritual. The changes came too fast. Their meals grew smaller until they were more symbolic than real. Half an apple, split 3 ways, black coffee for dinner. If one of them lost more weight in a week, the other would smile too tightly and start counting calories out loud. What started as encouragement turned sharp and quiet, like a blade you did not see until it cut you. Emily became obsessed with control. She hid food in her room and accused Brooke of sneaking snacks at night. I would hear her pacing, weighing herself over and over, the scale scraping against the bathroom floor. Brooke reacted differently. She grew secretive. I caught her once in the bathroom, injecting herself on a day that was not hers. She looked at me like a trapped animal and begged me not to say anything. They started watching each other's bodies like enemies. Their fingers dug into each other's waists, and their eyes lingered too long on each other's collarbones. Compliments became accusations. "Your thighs look thinner" meant "you stole from me." They stopped sleeping at the same time and stopped trusting the air between them. I tried to intervene. I told them they were scaring me. Emily said I was jealous. Brooke said I did not understand what it took to survive in this industry. One night, I heard them fighting behind the bathroom door, arguing over milligrams like it was life or death. That was when I realized it was. I started locking my door at night, not because I was afraid of strangers, but because I was afraid of the girls I had moved here with. The city outside was brutal, but what was happening inside our apartment was worse. I had watched ambition turn into obsession, and obsession rot into something hungry that never knew when to stop. I found Brooke on a Thursday morning, the kind of gray New York morning where the light never fully comes in through the windows. The bathroom door was half open. I remember thinking the scale was in the wrong place, tilted like it had been kicked. Then I saw her. Brooke was collapsed on the tile, one arm twisted under her, her face pressed sideways against the cold floor. Her eyes were open but empty, staring past the base of the toilet like she was still waiting for a number to appear. I screamed until my throat burned. Emily came running, barefoot, hair wild, swearing she had no idea what happened. She kept repeating the same sentence over and over, rocking back and forth in the hallway while the paramedics worked.
It wasn't her day. It wasn't her dose.
She sounded more confused than scared, like the rules mattered more than the body on the floor. I had to call 911 because I wanted to know what happened to Brooke. Emily swore she never touched Brooke's medication. She cried, begged, and clutched at my arms like I could confirm her innocence just by standing there. For a moment, I almost believed her. Almost. But then the cops showed us the footage. We always knew that there were cameras in our apartment for basic safety, but never really cared until that day. Emily watched it with me, her face draining of color as the screen played. It was on the hallway camera outside the bathroom, timestamped at 3:17 a.m. Emily's door opened slowly. She stepped out barefoot, eyes half-lidded, and movements stiff and unnatural. She walked into the bathroom carrying the injector. Minutes later, the camera caught her reflection in the mirror through the open door. She leaned over Brooke's body, whispering,
You're ahead of me.
she said softly, almost lovingly.
I can't let you in.
Emily collapsed, screaming when the video ended. She kept saying she did not remember any of it. The doctors later called it a psychotic episode, worsened by starvation, sleep deprivation, and obsession. The law still called it murder. Emily was sent to a mental institution, handcuffed and shaking, her bones jutting out like she had already started disappearing. I never went to see her again. The apartment feels haunted now. Not by Brooke's death, but by the girls they used to be. I threw out the scale. I scrubbed the bathroom floor until my hands bled. But sometimes, I still see her there when I close my eyes. Sometimes, I hear the whispering. I'm relieved I never took the injections. That relief sits heavy in my chest, tangled with guilt and fear. Because at night, when I finally sleep, I dream of charts on the fridge and numbers that never stop dropping. I dream of waking up with a syringe in my hand and no memory of how it got there. And I wake up wondering how close I came to becoming just another body beside the scale. The address was 4782 Brookfield Lane. It was one of those cookie-cutter suburban streets, you know, where every house looked the same. I'd been doing DoorDash for 8 months by then and knew the neighborhood like the back of my hand. Brookfield was always easy. People mostly tipped well and left their porch lights on. It was maybe 10:15 when I pulled up. The house had warm yellow lights glowing in the windows and a wreath on the door. Everything seemed routine for a late-night Tuesday delivery. I grabbed the bag and headed up the walkway. A woman who looked to be in her mid-30s answered the door. She was wearing faded jeans and a blue cardigan, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had a tired mom smile. 2 large pizzas, breadsticks, and a Coke, ma'am. She nodded and handed me 2 20s before I even said the total. The order was $23. Oh, let me get you some change.
Keep it.
She hissed. $17 tip on a Tuesday for pizza. I probably thanked her 3 times. I was turning to leave when she stopped me.
Hold up. Let me check the bag. Don't go till I come back.
I nodded as she stepped inside. She had left the door cracked open about 6 inches, so I could see into her hallway. There were family photos on the walls, and the carpet was beige and extremely dirty. When 5 minutes passed and she didn't show up, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling. Suddenly, voices started whispering from somewhere inside the house. I crept closer and could hear footsteps moving deeper into the house. The woman was talking to someone. The tone was low and intense. I couldn't make out words, but she sounded upset. As the conversation got louder, I shifted uncomfortably, trying to remember if I had spotted anyone when she'd answered the door. I was sure the house had seemed empty, but now there were definitely 2 voices going back and forth. Hers and someone else's, probably a guy. I thought about just leaving. I had my tip, the order was done, but something made me stay there. It was curiosity or maybe that weird gut feeling when something doesn't add up. Suddenly, the voices stopped and footsteps came back toward the front door. The door opened wider and the lady peeked out. She stared at me, but her whole face had changed. The smile was gone. Her expression had gone completely blank. She looked at me, then past me and at my car parked at the curb, then back at my face, like she was trying to work something out. Then she frowned and said,
Why are you still alive?
My blood ran cold. She had to be kidding, but she looked genuinely confused. My brain froze. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. The woman just kept staring at me with that blank expression, waiting for an answer I didn't have. Before I could say anything, she stepped back and slammed the door shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place and the chain lock while I stood there like an idiot, trying to make sense of what just happened. Through the window next to the door, I watched the lights start going off one after another. The front room fell dark first, followed by the hallway, then the kitchen in the back. It kept going, until the whole house went dark and silent, as if nobody had been there at all. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The DoorDash app showed the order is completed. The delivery was rated 5 stars with a $17 tip confirmed. Everything looked totally normal on my screen. But I was standing on a dark porch with my hands shaking, and I couldn't stop hearing her voice asking why I was still alive. I walked back to my car, got in, locked all the doors, and sat there staring at the dark house for a solid minute. I looked down at my hand, the 220s still clenched in my fist, wrinkled and damp with sweat. She'd tipped me before I even gave her the food. Most people tip through the app, or they tip after they get their food. But she'd pulled out cash immediately, like the money had been sitting there ready. I started the car and drove away. I only made it about 2 blocks before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too hard to steer. When I got home, I called DoorDash support and told the guy something weird had happened on my last delivery. He advised me to report it through the app before he hung up. I drove past that house 3 times over the next week. Couldn't help myself. Every time it looked the same. The lights were on, there were cars in the driveway, and the wreath was still hanging on the door. But I kept thinking about the voices I'd heard, about whomever she'd been talking to, whom I never saw, and the way she'd looked at me like I wasn't supposed to be standing there, alive. I'm 25 now, and I still deliver food, just with a different app. I've probably done 2,000 orders since that night, but I never went back to Brookfield Lane. And whenever I get a delivery to a quiet street with nice houses and warm lights in the windows, my chest tightens up. I check the address 3 times, just to make sure it's not 4782. Because I still don't know what she expected to find when she opened the door the second time. But I know I should be grateful I wasn't that. I started my OnlyFans account in April after my landlord posted an eviction notice. I was 26, working 2 part-time jobs that barely covered groceries and drowning in medical bills from a car accident my insurance refused to cover. The account felt like a last resort. At first, the requests were normal. People wanted custom videos, voice messages, and harmless dares, and would tip 50, maybe $100 if I went along with it. One night, a new username, @PatronSaint, lit up my notification. The dude had tipped me $2,000 and hadn't even bothered with a hello. I stared at the notification for 10 minutes, trying to figure if it was some prank before I reached out to ask what he wanted me to do. He replied the next day, saying he'd tell me what he wanted, only after I'd successfully proven that I was devoted to my followers and serious about my work. I asked him what would show him I was devoted and serious. He dared me to stay awake for 36 hours and live stream it. He offered to pay me another $2,000 if I did it. I Googled if it was possible and accepted the challenge. I drank energy drinks until my hands shook and talked to the camera while my eyes burned. When it was over, he praised my nerve and sent another $1,000 as a bonus. He asked if I'd be up for another dare. He really loved how courageous I was and promised to pay me $5,000 to stand barefoot outside all night. I didn't want to, but the money was hard to refuse. So I made arrangements and stood on my balcony from midnight to 6 a.m. until I couldn't feel my feet. I got frostbite on 3 toes and nearly passed out. He sent the money immediately and asked if it was worth it. I told him it did, when, in reality, I could hardly stand up straight for days. But PatronSaint was tipping more than all of my other subscribers combined, and I needed the money to stay afloat. 2 weeks later, he sent me the biggest offer. He'd pay me $15,000 if I broke one of my own teeth on camera. I read the message 3 times before I told him I wouldn't do it. He didn't respond for 2 days. In those 2 days, my landlord called twice about the overdue rent. He was threatening eviction when my bank account only had $47. I'd run out of options weeks ago, and this was the only one left. I set up my phone in the bathroom and found a metal wrench under my sink. My hands shook as I positioned the wrench against my back left molar and tried to make myself do it. I tried 3 times, but couldn't. Then I thought about the eviction notice, the medical bills, and the fact that I had nowhere else to go. I closed my eyes and bit down hard. The crack was the worst sound I've ever heard. I felt it in my skull. The pain came half a second later, and I collapsed with blood pouring from my mouth and my vision going black. I was screaming, but couldn't hear it over the ringing. When I came back to myself enough to think, I grabbed my phone with bloody hands and stopped the recording. I sent it to him, and the money appeared in my account within minutes. I spent the next 3 weeks recovering, and those were the most painful days of my life. Some nights I'd toss and turn, begging sleep to take over. I'd give up eating solid food, and the gap in my teeth felt obscene every time I ran my tongue over it. But I'd made rent and bought groceries and paid down some of the medical bills. I'd been telling myself it was worth it, until one night. I was going through my subscriber list and noticed something strange about Patron Saint. I had scrolled through our entire conversation history and realized he had never reached out to me first, even once. Every one of our conversations had been started by me. My stomach dropped. I checked the payment details and realized all the tips came from the same prepaid debit card. My heart pounded in my chest as I recalled the last 4 digits of my ex-boyfriend Daniel's card. It was Daniel, the same guy who had begged me not to start OnlyFans when we were together. I remember a friend of mine telling me he worked as a dental assistant and still had keys to my apartment from when we dated. I went back to the last message he'd sent after the tooth video. I'd been too out of it from the pain to read it carefully. It read, "Now everyone will know you're damaged." I wiped my OnlyFans account immediately, quit the job, and moved apartments. I even found a way to get the tooth fixed. On paper, I started over, but Daniel still shows up in my bathroom mirror every time I brush my teeth or even look at myself in the mirror. It leaves me disgusted with myself all over again. It took me months to really face the toxic truth seeping in, that the man I once loved and trusted had been sick enough to pay to watch me destroy myself. But what hollowed me out wasn't just what he did. It was realizing that he didn't even have to lift a finger to do it. My own desperation and foolish blindness were enough to get the job done. Fabiana and I were 17 when she downloaded Tinder that Saturday. Both of us were hanging out at her kitchen table and had nothing better to do. She thought it would be funny to see what type of guys are out there. We set my age to 21, picked the best photo on my phone, and started swiping like it was a game. Most of the matches were harmless, like college guys who thought I was a real 21-year-old, and a few were obviously too old and too eager. We'd screenshot the strange ones and dump them in the group chat. Vincent was different. His profile was totally aesthetic. Instead of the usual bathroom selfies or snaps with fish, his photos were all yachts and rooftop parties in places that looked stupidly expensive. His bio went on about Swiss boarding schools and traveling for work. He was 32, which honestly should have been our cue to close the app, but somehow it made us intrigued. Vincent texted within minutes of matching. The conversation was smooth, in a way neither of us had experienced before. He wasn't asking for pictures or being crude. He asked what I liked to do, what kind of music I was into, and whether I'd ever been to Europe. He dropped comments about taking the right girl shopping in Milan, and how he preferred women who knew what they wanted. After an hour of this, Fabiana grabbed my phone and read the whole thread from the beginning.
He wants to spoil you, Julia. He's gonna buy us expensive stuff. We'd have a few dinners, some jewelry, then block him. My cousin does this all the time. What's the worst that can happen?
She squealed, grinning. I knew it was stupid, but Fabiana had a way of making stupid things sound reasonable. We agreed to meet him the following morning at Riverside Park. It was a public place, and we would both be together in broad daylight. The meet felt safe until Vincent texted again. Julia, I'm sorry. I gotta fly tonight for a business meeting tomorrow morning, and I won't be in town for a week. I really don't want to go without seeing you. Can you make it tonight instead? I'll be in a silver Porsche. Come at 9, okay? Fabiana said yes before I could even think about it. I told myself it would be fine. The park was only 5 minutes from her house. We'd be together and leave the second anything felt wrong. We snuck out at 8:45. The park was quiet and dark in the way parks get after the families go home. The streetlights along the main path had gaps in them, with long stretches of shadow between each pool of orange light. As we neared the entrance, I spotted a black van idling near the gate with its lights off. Fabiana saw it too, and we both slowed down.
That's probably his security. Rich people travel with security all the time.
Vincent had told us to meet by the large oak tree near the south end of the park. We kept walking. The gravel path crunched under our shoes. The van stayed where it was, and I kept telling myself that this was normal, and we'd probably laugh about this tomorrow over breakfast at her kitchen table. Suddenly, 2 men jumped out of the bushes so fast I didn't even register what was happening, until a hand was clamped over my mouth and I was being dragged backward. I tried screaming and getting enough air, but the grip was just too tight. Another man had caught Fabiana and was dragging her toward the van, which was waiting with its door already open. I kicked and clawed and twisted my head just enough to sink my teeth into his wrist as hard as I could. He swore, and his grip loosened just enough for me to tear myself free and stumble forward onto the gravel. By then, they'd shoved Fabiana into the van. Our eyes met, and I shivered at how desperate and scared she looked. The man lunged for me again.
Leave her!
The one by the van barked.
We got one! The boss won't be totally mad!
The man jumped in the van. The doors closed, and they pulled out of the park and disappeared down the road. Then, it was just me on the ground, with blood in my mouth and gravel in my palms. I was shivering and sobbing when I called 911 from the middle of the path. I couldn't stop shaking long enough to get the address out clearly. The police came, took my statement, and put out a description of the van. But by the time they started looking, it had been 40 minutes since Fabiana had disappeared into the dark. They never found her. The investigation went on for months. Detectives talked to me so many times that I had the questions memorized before they asked them. Vincent's profile was traced to an account created 3 days before we matched, using stolen photos of a real person who had nothing to do with any of it. The van's plates came back to a rental, paid for in cash. Every lead dried up. I'm 24 now. I finished school, got a job, and talk to a therapist every week. Most days, I function like a normal person, but I still sleep with the light on and can't hear a car idling outside at night without my chest going tight. I still think about the way Fabiana's eyes found mine in the last second before they took her. She looked so scared, like she was asking me to do something, and I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't do it anyway. I don't know where she is. Nobody does. And the hardest part, the part I've never said out loud to anyone, is that somewhere in the back of my mind, I already know the answer to that. I just can't make myself finish the thought. I left around midnight after Dad threw a plate at my head again. It missed, but the explosion of ceramic against the wall told me everything I needed to know. I looked at my mom, who was passed out on the couch with an empty pill bottle on her chest. I grabbed my backpack and walked out of the place I'd been calling home. I was 15, with nowhere to go except Marcus's, my best friend, who lived about 40 miles north and had promised I could crash at his place anytime my folks let their addiction cloud whatever parental affection they had left. That night, I'd finally decided to take him up on it, but The problem was getting there with $7 in my pocket and a dead phone. I walked for 2 hours until I hit the highway. It was one of those empty stretches where you could stand in the middle of the road and not see a single soul for 10 minutes straight. When I finally saw headlights, my heart jumped. I stuck my thumb out, but the truck slowed before it even reached me. The guy rolled down the window and smiled.
Need a ride, kid?
I nodded and told him I was heading north. He unlocked the passenger door without taking his eyes off me. The guy looked maybe 40. He was clean-shaven and wore a gray hoodie that looked too expensive for someone driving a beat-up truck at midnight. Thanks, I smiled, climbing in. The truck smelled like coffee and a stingy chemical that made my throat burn. The dude introduced himself as Carl as we pulled back onto the highway. For the first few minutes, it was quiet, but I could feel his eyes on me.
Rough night, huh? What, running away from home? I could tell. I've picked up my fair share of runaways over the years.
He chuckled as he adjusted the rearview mirror to see me better. I remained silent. He clicked his tongue and asked,
So, how old are you, Jonah?
18. I lied. He guffawed, muttering something condescending under his breath, before he told me how he knew I was lying and didn't look a day older than 15. My stomach dropped. He laughed at my face.
Perfect.
He breathed the word out slowly, like he was savoring it.
That's the perfect age.
The way he said it made my skin crawl. I watched him from the corner of my eye. He was drumming his fingers on the steering wheel in this weird rhythm. My throat was drying up.
You sick? Got any allergies or medical problems?
His tone was conversational, but there was something underneath it that seemed eager. I shook my head.
Good, good.
He nodded to himself.
Does anyone know you're out here?
I lied and said my friend was expecting me and would call the cops if I didn't show. Carl glanced at me, and for the first time, the smile slipped. He asked what time. 1 a.m., I replied. He checked the dashboard clock. It was 12:45. The smile came back, but it was different now.
Plenty of time.
We passed an exit sign for Route 47, but Carl didn't slow down. If anything, he sped up when I told him that it was my turn.
I know a better route.
Suddenly, his voice had lost that friendly tone. I said I needed that exit, but Carl hardly responded. He just kept accelerating. Panic started to claw in. My heart was pounding as I reached for the door handle and pulled it, but it wouldn't work. I tried again, yanking harder. The handle moved, but the door stayed shut. Carl's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was ice cold.
Don't do that. The handle's broken from the inside.
He let go, but kept his eyes on me too long before looking back at the road. I asked where we were going.
Somewhere nobody looks for runaway kids.
He winked and started that finger tapping again. My hands were shaking. I was sweating despite the cold air. I wiped my forehead with my sleeve, and that's when Carl saw the scar on my forearm, thick and pink, running from wrist to elbow. Carl's whole body went rigid. He slammed the brakes so fast I lurched forward. He pulled onto the shoulder. His eyes were glued to my arm, and he suddenly looked furious.
What the hell is that?
I told him it was a scar that I'd gotten by climbing a fence to escape some guys who jumped me.
When? How long ago?
3 weeks back, I replied. He sat there breathing through his nose, with the tapping getting faster, his jaw clenched tight. Finally, he got out and walked around to my side, and the door opened from the outside.
Get out!
Fear had made me freeze. He grabbed my arm and yanked me onto the gravel. I stumbled and almost fell. He was standing over me with his face twisted in disgust.
They want clean, perfect kids with no scars. Do you have any idea how much time I wasted on you?
His foot shot out and kicked me in the shin. I groaned and doubled over as he climbed back into the truck and peeled out, spraying gravel. I watched the taillights disappear down the highway until there was nothing but darkness and the sound of my own breathing. I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, trying not to think about what would have happened if I hadn't had that scar. It took 3 hours to limp to a gas station. Marcus picked me up. I never told him what happened. I'm 17 now and living with Marcus's family. I never told anyone about that night, but I think about Carl and the way he looked at me like I was merchandise. About the kids who got into that truck and were perfect. And I wonder how many of them are still alive. I worked as a receptionist at a small marketing firm downtown a few years back. My boss, Mr. Harris, ran the company with his business partner. He was in his early 40s and married with 2 kids, based on the family photo on his desk. He'd often ask about my weekend, and when I said I stayed home, he'd say things like how a pretty girl like me staying home on a Saturday night was a waste. I'd laugh awkwardly and change the subject. It felt weird, but I told myself he was just being friendly, and maybe that's how things were in corporate. But then, the questions got more personal over the next few weeks. Whether I had a boyfriend, why I wasn't married yet, did I live alone or with roommates? Each question made my skin crawl a little more, but I kept smiling and being polite. Then, one evening, after everyone had left, Mr. Harris appeared at my desk. "Hey, Susie, let's go out for dinner tonight." He leaned against my desk.
Actually, my family's coming over.
I giggled nervously. "Oh, I won't hold you more than a couple of hours, sweetheart. You're a smart girl, and you can go far in this business, if you know how to play the game right." My heart started racing. I told him I couldn't and had already made plans. He kept pushing, saying we could talk about my career and that I had potential for advancement. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, but he followed me to the elevator, still talking. I flashed him a placating smile I'd learned as a woman trying to navigate uncomfortable situations till the elevator doors closed and I exhaled. My hands were shaking. My bus stop was only 3 blocks from the office. I walked quickly, checking over my shoulder twice, but the street was empty. I'd been waiting at the stop for maybe 5 minutes when a black luxury car pulled up to the curb beside me. The passenger window rolled down, and Mr. Harris leaned over from the driver's seat. "Come on, get in. I'll drive you home, sweetie." He opened the passenger door from inside. There was no one at the bus stop, and suddenly I began feeling fear rushing down my spine. Every instinct in my body was screaming. I told him I preferred the bus and started walking away. I heard his car door open and footsteps behind me. Next, I felt his hand clamped around my wrist, yanking me backward. "Why are you being so ungrateful, you little witch? Can't you see how nice I'm being? What, you think you're too good for me?"
Let go!
I struggled to yank my hand free, but his grip wouldn't loosen. My nerves were fried. I felt disgusted and desperate to get away from him. Suddenly, my hand shot up and slapped him hard across the face. His grip loosened in shock, and I ran without looking back. My heels were slowing me down, so I kicked them off and kept running in bare feet. Behind me, I heard his car engine roar. Seconds later, the black car crawled beside me, matching my pace. He rolled down the window, and I could hear him snickering. "Where you gonna go, Susie? God, you look good when you're scared." I turned down a side street, hoping to lose him, but he followed. The street was narrower and deserted. The car accelerated suddenly, coming right at me. I screamed and jumped onto the sidewalk. He slammed on the brakes, stopping inches away, still laughing. "Oops, almost gotcha. Want to try again?" He did it again and again, like a cat playing with a mouse. My lungs were burning, and my feet were bleeding from running on pavement. I couldn't keep going. I turned onto another street, it was even darker and far away from the main traffic. I realized too late that it was a mistake. The car followed with its headlights bright in my peripheral vision. He accelerated again, this time faster. I tried to dodge, but my foot caught on something, and I went down hard. I tumbled off the curb into a shallow drainage ditch, with my ankle twisting beneath me. Pain shot up my leg, and I screamed. The car came closer and closer. It was inches away from my face when he slammed the brake, and it stopped. Mr. Harris got out and stood at the edge of the ditch, looking down at me with this cold, disgusted expression. I was crying, covered in dirt, my ankle throbbing.
Please.
I begged him. He walked, knelt beside me, and caught my chin in a painful grip as he spoke. You think you're special, huh? Think you can reject men and face no consequences? Next time a man offers you something far more than you deserve, remember this. Remember how easy it was for people like us to break you. Understand? He spat on my face, stood up, got back into his car, and drove away. I sat in that ditch for 20 minutes before I could move. Eventually, a woman walking her dog found me and called 911. The paramedics checked my ankle. It was badly sprained, but not broken. The police took a statement, but I could tell they didn't really care. They asked if he assaulted me or touched me inappropriately. When I said he grabbed my wrist and chased me, they said it sounded like a misunderstanding. I should probably find a new job to avoid the situation. I never went back to that office. I didn't even collect my last paycheck. For weeks, I was terrified he'd find me. I changed my bus route, walked different streets, and looked over my shoulder constantly. Every black car made my heart race. He never came, but the fear never left. I'm 21 years old, and I've learned that predators don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like successful businessmen with family photos on their desks, and they laugh while they hunt you. I was hired to survey the site because no one else wanted it. The land sat several miles outside of town, an undeveloped industrial stretch that never became anything meaningful. It was made up of flat frozen fields, half-collapsed fencing, and concrete pads buried beneath years of neglect and snow. It was the kind of place developers forgot existed. I was 39 years old, a contract surveyor, and I was used to working alone. That day was supposed to be routine. I planned to take my measurements, mark the boundaries, and leave before the weather turned. But before I was done, the snowfall took place. At first, it was the kind of snow you barely register, thin flakes drifting sideways in the wind. Over time, the wind strengthened, and the sky began to disappear. Within an hour, the horizon was gone entirely. The ground and sky blended into the same dull white, and sound stopped carrying. Even my own footsteps felt muted, as if I were walking through thick padding. I checked my GPS, which was still working but struggling. That was when I noticed the footprints. They crossed my path at an angle, shallow but deliberate. They were not hurried and not random. Each step was evenly spaced and pressed just deep enough to suggest weight without urgency. Whoever made them had been moving slowly and carefully, conserving energy. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at them, while the wind erased sound around me. I followed the footsteps for roughly 20 yards. They ended abruptly. Fresh snow had covered them completely, leaving no turnoff, no disturbance, and no indication of where they went. It was as if the person had vanished. My chest tightened, but I told myself that snow and wind could erase tracks quickly. I forced myself to continue working. Visibility continued to drop. Soon, I could only see 10 feet ahead of me, then 5. The whiteout thickened until depth perception felt unreliable, like walking inside a blank wall. I turned back toward my truck earlier than planned, feeling uneasy in a way I couldn't explain. I saw the shape of what looked like a man. I stopped moving immediately. The shape remained still, letting the snow fall through it, which told me it was real. When I shifted my position slightly, the shape adjusted as well, maintaining distance. I realized he was watching me. As the distance closed, details became visible. The man was tall but hunched against the cold. He wore layered animal hides mixed with scraps of industrial insulation, including pink fiberglass and silver-backed foam. Everything was stitched together with wire and twine. The clothing was not theatrical or decorative. It was practical and carefully constructed by someone who understood how deadly exposure could be. His face was uncovered. His skin was pale and damaged, and his lips were split and scarred from severe frostbite. His teeth were always exposed, giving him the appearance of a permanent grin. He wore no mask and carried no visible weapon. That absence frightened me more than anything else. I turned and walked toward my truck. He did not rush or follow directly. Instead, he repositioned himself. Every time I changed direction, I would catch sight of him again, slightly closer than before. He used the snowfall as cover and let me do the moving. At one point, he spoke.
You won't hear anyone out here.
His voice was flat and dry, and it sounded calm, as if he were stating a simple fact rather than making a threat. I did not respond. When I reached my truck, my hand shook so badly that I dropped my keys twice. I climbed inside and slammed the door behind me. I turned the key, but the engine did not start. The dashboard lights flickered briefly and then went dark. I tried again, but nothing happened. I got out and opened the hood. The fuel line had been cut cleanly. It had not been torn or frozen. It had been deliberately severed. I felt a shift in the air behind me. He was closer now, close enough that I could see the stitching in his clothing and the frost clinging to his beard. I could smell him too, which surprised me. The scent was a mix of old fabric, cold metal, and something faintly sweet and rotten beneath it. He dragged something beneath the snow as he moved. I could not see it clearly, but it appeared to be a length of a cable or a hooked tool used for hauling scrap. He still did not rush. He did not need to. That was when I understood what he was doing. He was hunting me. I couldn't wait there for him to get me. I abandoned the truck and walked blindly into the whiteout. My GPS had stopped working, and my sense of direction disappeared within minutes. I knew moving quickly was dangerous, but panic took over. My lungs burned, my legs went numb, and my thoughts scattered. Every time I slowed down, I found him standing just within sight, waiting patiently. As I moved through the fields, I noticed signs. There were snow-covered pits dug low into the ground and shaped to block the wind. There were food wrappers frozen into the earth. I saw discarded boots standing upright in the snow with no feet inside them. There was no blood and no sign of struggle. I don't remember how much distance I covered that night. Eventually, I collapsed near a service road as the snowfall began to thin. A plow driver found me barely conscious, blue-lipped and mumbling incoherently. I woke up in a hospital with frost-nipped fingers and a doctor telling me how lucky I was to be alive. I informed authorities, who later investigated the site. They found nothing unusual. The snow had erased every track, every shelter, and every sign of habitation. They told me the hypothermia could cause confusion and hallucinations. They suggested the footprints might have been mine, and there actually was no man that night. He was there. I knew it. I still dream of that exposed grin appearing through falling snow. He was not a hunter chasing prey. He was someone who understood winter well enough to let it finish the job. I posted the Instagram close friends story at 1:40 a.m. on a Saturday when I couldn't sleep and had nothing better to do. It was a video of my TV playing some reality show in the dark, with my feet propped up on the coffee table. It was meaningless content, but I always did things like that when I was bored and wanted my friends to know I was awake. Usually, someone from the list would text me, and we'd spend time bickering about one thing or another until sleep consumed either of us. My close friends list had exactly 12 people on it. Some were college roommates, a few were cousins, and my best friend, Divya, from childhood. My phone pinged with a reaction within seconds. It was Fire Emo. I tapped to see who it was, and the name made me frown. It was a guy named Rohan. I tapped on his profile picture and remembered him as a senior from my high school. We'd barely talked back then, except for a few exchanges during school fests and celebrations, and even that had stopped after graduation. I stared at his name, trying to remember if I'd ever added him to close friends. I was always very careful about it and kept it tight. I went through my settings and removed his ID and tried convincing myself that maybe I had mistakenly added him, but the explanation just didn't sit right. Heaving a sigh, I put my phone down and I tried to focus on the TV show instead. But the buzz of my phone caught my attention. I picked it up, and it was Rohan again. I opened the inbox and nearly dropped my phone. He had texted me, "Turn around." My stomach churned. I sat frozen on my couch, staring at those two words, before I slowly looked over my shoulder at the empty living room behind me. But my apartment was the same as it always had been. Before I could recover from the previous shock, another text buzzed through. No, the other room. He was talking about my bedroom. My breathing picked up. I could see the door from where I was sitting on the couch. It was slightly open, but I knew I had closed it out of habit before I sat down. I strained my ears and could hear the soft padding of footsteps echoing through the space. They were coming from inside my bedroom. I didn't think twice. I grabbed my phone and ran straight out of the apartment. I called the police from the lobby, with my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. They arrived in maybe 10 minutes. 2 officers went up to my apartment, while I waited downstairs with a third. They were up there for a long time. When they came back down, one of them was walking Rohan out in cuffs. He'd been under my bed for hours. The officer told me they found his phone still open on Instagram. He'd been watching my stories in real time from underneath me. At the station, Rohan explained how he'd done it. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been at a cafe near my office working on my laptop. Rohan had been there too. I hadn't noticed him. He'd stood behind me at some point, close enough to see my screen, while I was scrolling through Instagram settings. He'd created a fake account, pretending to be one of those people, and sent me follow requests over the following weeks. I'd accepted it without thinking because I recognized the name and assumed they were second accounts or that I'd somehow missed adding them the first time. His fake account had access to everything I posted to close friends, and he had been watching me for weeks, seeing everything I thought was private. He had tracked my habits and schedule before he planned the entire thing. Through the stories, he figured I always left the small back window cracked open at night to let fresh air in, and waited for the right moment before he let himself in. He then hid under my bed and watched my stories, waiting for the right moment to respond. When they asked him why he did it and what he was planning to do, he said he wanted to take pictures of me while I was sleeping, said he was going to post them to Instagram. I moved out of my apartment 2 days later. I couldn't spend another night there, knowing he'd been under my bed. Despite my friends trying to convince me it wasn't my fault, I deleted my Instagram account entirely and even got a fresh number. I'm seeing a therapist who specializes in trauma and stalking cases. The police helped me get a restraining order that felt like useless paper, but was all the legal system could offer. It's been months. My company transferred me to a different city. The neighborhood is safe, but I still have 3 deadbolts on my door and cameras in every room that feed to my phone. I check under my bed every single night before I sleep, and I still can't do it without my heart racing and my hands shaking, because I know that privacy is a myth and close friends mean nothing. That someone can be watching you through a screen while they're lying 5 feet away in the dark under your bed. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't run, and I'm grateful I never had to find out. I created my OnlyFans account 3 months after my divorce was finalized. My ex-husband had left me for someone younger, and the settlement barely covered the legal fees. I was 38, working retail part-time, and staring at overdue bills I had no way to pay, when a friend brought up OnlyFans as a joke one night. By the time I got home, I'd made an account. At first, it felt empowering to know that people out there still thought I was beautiful. They wanted to see me and paid just to talk to me. The validation filled the void the divorce had hollowed out, and the income meant I could keep my apartment and stop lying awake, doing math about which bills to pay first. Most of my subscribers seemed harmless, and soon enough I got good at responding without thinking too hard about who was on the other end of the screen. One of them was Watcher 67. His first message came late on a Thursday night in mid-February. I was in my bedroom, finishing up a live stream, when a notification appeared, telling me I should close my curtains, that my room could be seen clearly from the street. I looked up at my window. The curtains were wide open, and I could see my reflection in the dark glass. I got up and yanked them close, so hard the rod nearly came off the wall. The comment made me uneasy. I stared at my phone, trying to decide if it was a lucky guess or something worse.
Maybe he'd seen my address in a video background?
I muttered. I reassured myself that it was nothing, and went to bed with every light off. The sound of glass breaking downstairs jolted me awake. The digital clock on my bedside table read 2 a.m. I sat up in my bed, my heart already hammering before my brain fully processed what I'd heard. The house was dead silent. I waited, holding my breath, telling myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it was a stray cat or something. Then, I heard footsteps echoing through the silence. My breath hitched. Someone had broken in. I searched for my phone, but couldn't find it in the dark. I thought about running for the door, but I'd have to go past the stairs to get there. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I crawled into my closet, pulled the door shut, and crouched in the back corner behind my hanging clothes. The footsteps moved through the first floor. I could track them by the creaking floorboards. They were in my kitchen before they approached the stairs. Each step was slow and measured, like whoever it was had all the time in the world. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. My bedroom door was open. I heard the footsteps cross the threshold and stop. They were in my room, maybe 5 feet away.
Hiding won't save you, sweetheart.
I could see light bleeding under the closet door from a flashlight or phone. 5 minutes passed. Then, he stopped outside the closet door. I squeezed my eyes shut, begging God to save me. The handle turned, and the door creaked open, inch by inch. I was crying without making a sound. Tears ran down my face, certain this was it. This was how I died, in my closet at 38 years old because I'd been too desperate and lonely to think clearly about what putting myself online might cost. Light flooded in. I peeped through my lashes and saw his shadow standing there, panting like he'd been running, even though I knew he hadn't.
Please, please, please.
My brain kept chanting. Suddenly, the man stopped. His breathing grew quiet. He took one step back, shook his head, and whispered,
No, not today.
After that, I heard his footsteps retreat across my bedroom, into the hallway, and down the stairs. The back door opened, and then slammed shut. I stayed in that closet for another 20 minutes before I could make myself move. When I finally came out, I called 911, my hand shaking so badly I had to dial 3 times. The police found the broken window in my kitchen where he'd gotten in. They took my statement and searched the house, but, as expected, found nothing else. One officer asked if I had an ex-boyfriend who might want to scare me. I said no. I didn't mention the OnlyFans account because I couldn't bear the look I knew I'd get. I deleted my account that night, packed 2 suitcases, and left the apartment the next morning. I crashed on a friend's couch for about 3 weeks before moving 3 hours away to a town where nobody knew me. I got a job waiting tables where I could keep my back to the wall and see everyone who came in. It's been years. I've built a stable life that doesn't involve cameras, strangers, or anything that might make me visible to people I can't see. But sometimes, at night, I still wake up thinking about what he said. And I wonder if he left that night because something stopped him, or because he was just rehearsing for the day he'd finally decide to show up. Because a tiny part of me knows he's still out there, waiting for the right day to say, yes, today. Sophia started at our accounting firm 3 months ago. She was beautiful, confident, and laughed at all of my jokes. She made me feel seen in a way my wife Rachel hadn't in years. The flirt started with coffee breaks that lasted too long, then lunch, where we'd talk about anything except work. Sophia's hand would brush mine, reaching for sugar, and I started feeling alive again. Then, one night, after everyone left, she kissed me in the conference room, and I kissed her back. We started meeting in empty offices during lunch for quick makeout sessions that felt dangerous and thrilling. I told myself it wasn't really cheating if we didn't sleep together. But soon enough, the rumors started at work. I panicked and told Sophia we needed to be more careful.
Or we should stop sneaking around.
She traced her finger along my collar.
Come to my place this weekend, Dylan. We'll have real privacy. Take things all the way. I want to show you every part of me, even the ugly ones.
My heart pounded. I'd have to lie to Rachel about working late.
Then lie to her. I'll make it worth it. You'll forget she even exists.
Saturday night, I told Rachel the client presentation got moved up, and I needed to pull an all-nighter at the office. She barely looked up from her book and just told me to eat my meals on time. I showed up at Sophia's house at 8 with a bottle of wine, dressed nice, nervous, guilty, and excited all at once. She answered in a black dress that made me forget every reservation I'd had and pulled me inside. The smell of rotting garbage hit me immediately. The living room was a disaster, with trash piled in corners, pizza boxes stacked on the couch, and newspapers covering the floor. The kitchen was worse, with dishes molding in the sink and garbage bags overflowing. Sophia apologized for the mess as she took the wine unbothered and said she'd been meaning to clean. Every instinct screamed to leave. Maybe we should head out instead.
Don't be silly, Dee. I made a special dinner just for you.
The dining room table was set with candles lit. She brought out pasta, and I forced myself to eat.
Your wife, does she know? About us? About what we're doing?
Sophia smiled mid-meal. Huh? You'd think I'd be here if she knew?
Poor thing. Sitting home alone while her husband's here with me. Men are always the same. You want the thrill but can't handle the reality. She probably suspects. Women always know. I knew when my husband cheated.
Something about her tone made my skin crawl. I started to get up, saying maybe we should reconsider, but she held my hand.
You feel guilty. That's cute. But you're here anyway. You already made your choice, Dylan. Might as well finish what you started. Let's go upstairs.
The bedroom was worse than downstairs, with clothes everywhere, empty bottles, and that chemical smell mixing with rot. But Sophia pushed me onto the bed and climbed on top of me, kissing me hard. My hands moved to her waist. I forgot all about Rachel or the smell. I was so lost in her that I didn't see the blade until it was too late. She drove the knife right into my shoulder, and I screamed. White-hot pain exploded through my body as blood sprayed everywhere.
My husband made the same face before I killed him for cheating on me.
She giggled as she twisted the knife in. My loud shrieks filled the house while her giggles intensified.
You screamed like that too.
I threw her off and stumbled toward the door, clutching my shoulder. Blood poured between my fingers. She followed, laughing with the knife dripping blood.
Where are you going, Dylan? You came here to f me. Let's finish what you started. You wanted to be a cheater. Now you get to die like one.
I ran down the hallway, dizzy from blood loss, and saw a door. I threw it open and stumbled down the stairs, slamming and locking it shut behind me. I could hear footsteps overhead. She was humming an old melody as she scraped the knife against the wall. I fumbled for a light switch in the darkness. The bulb flickered on, and I froze. Some 5 men, in various stages of decomposition, were arranged against the walls. Some were recent enough that I could see their faces. They were all around my age, with wedding rings still on their fingers. The pasta swirled in my stomach, and I puked all over the floor. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I told them everything. Above me, Sophia was pounding on the door, giggling. I could hear her getting some objects to get the door open. The dispatcher told me to stay put and that help was on the way. I just prayed they'd reach me faster than she would. The door was rattling. Sophia was screaming at me. She was pissed that I had my phone, and I called the police. I pressed my jacket against my shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. The pounding stopped suddenly, and footsteps moved away. A door slammed, and a car engine roared. Police arrived 7 minutes later and found me in the basement, surrounded by corpses. Found the blood trail upstairs and evidence of at least 6 murders. Sophia's real name was Jennifer Cole. Her actual husband had been her first victim 5 years ago. Everything else was fabricated. She'd been hunting married men who strayed, seducing them, then killing them. I spent 3 days in the hospital. The knife had missed major arteries by centimeters. Rachel came and sat by my bed in silence for hours before finally speaking. She said the police told her everything about where I was and why I was there. I started to apologize, but she told me not to. She said she didn't want my apologies. She wanted a divorce. She left and filed papers that week. I didn't contest anything. Jennifer was still at large, possibly hunting under a new identity. I see a therapist now, PTSD from the attack, but it's more than that. It's guilt and shame, the knowledge that I was so willing to betray someone who loved me that I almost got myself killed. And maybe, at some point, I deserved it. I was in my senior year, but I'd known Robbie Mercer for almost a decade. He was one of those people you recognize by face, even if you don't really know them. That dude was a little geeky and hella awkward, which is probably why he ate his lunch alone, did his homework in the library during free period, and never went to football games or parties or anything remotely social. But he was also kind of fluffy cute and sweet in a way that made you root for him. I had always felt like he just needed someone to give him a chance to shine, and that's why I didn't mind it much when he slid into my Instagram DMs within minutes of posting that baby monkey reel.
Punch is literally the cutest thing on the internet. I'm simply obsessed with his little wrinkled face,
he wrote.
Oh my god, you kidding?
I replied. We started chatting and I found myself smiling at my phone. Robbie was funny, a little awkward, but in an endearing way. He sent me more Punch videos and we talked about school, music, and other important stuff. But soon, he started texting me literally every day. He'd send Punch reels, good morning texts, and questions about my day and life. He'd message me during class, dinner, and even in the middle of the night. It got to a point where my phone never stopped buzzing, and the messages were getting more and more personal.
You're my best and only friend, Julia. I wish we could be more than that.
He texted one evening, even though we'd never hung out in person. He tried calling me multiple times a day. When I didn't pick up, he'd send paragraphs about how much he missed my voice. I felt bad for him, but it was getting overwhelming. I told him I needed space. He sent me 20 messages in response, asking what he'd done wrong. I tried being gentle, but couldn't think of any way I could stop him. So, I blocked him. That night, I woke up to a weird sound in my room. I opened my eyes, and there was a figure standing in the corner by my closet. He was tall and donning what looked like a monkey costume. The big plastic eyes caught the light from my window, and I screamed.
No, don't be scared, Julia.
Robbie replied, scurrying near my bed.
It's just me. Like Punch? You love Punch, right?
I screamed again and scrambled backward on my bed until I hit the headboard. He kept coming closer, the mask tilted at an angle that made it look like it was studying me.
My life is just like Punch,
he chuckled.
I'm alone and unwanted too. Nobody wants to keep me. But you're different. You smiled at me in the hallway and answered my messages.
He reached out toward me, and I saw he was holding a stuffed little monkey plush.
I want you to be mine, Julia,
he whispered.
My soft toy. We can be together like Punch and his owner.
Suddenly, I heard pounding footsteps in the hallway.
Julia? Julia!
My father yelled my name from the other side. Unfortunately, my bedroom door was locked.
Robbie, please.
I choked out, but couldn't form a sentence. I was just so scared. I could hear my father throwing his weight against the door frame. After the fourth or maybe fifth try, it cracked at its hinges. Robbie turned toward the sound. The mask swiveled, and for a second, he just stood there, frozen, like he hadn't planned for this part. By now, my dad had broken through the door and lunged at him. Robbie didn't fight. He simply surrendered, while my dad tackled him to the ground and pinned him. My mom was calling the police. I was still pressed against my headboard, shaking so hard my teeth were chattering. The police came and took him away, still wearing the costume. They found out later he'd been planning it for weeks. He'd figured out which window was mine by watching the house from the street and climbed the tree outside to get in. He'd been in my room for almost 20 minutes before I woke up. He told the police he loved me, that we had a connection, and I was the only person who'd ever been nice to him. He wanted us to be together, like Punch and his owner. He'd brought the stuffed monkey as a token of his love, said I could keep it and think of him whenever I looked at it. They sent Robbie to a juvenile facility. He'd stay there for a while. Dad got me a restraining order that extends past that. My parents installed cameras and better locks, and I switched schools halfway through senior year. Yet, I can't watch videos of Punch anymore. Can't even see images of monkeys without my chest getting tight. My friends don't understand why I blocked all the animal content accounts I used to go gaga over. I've never told them the real reason. Because every time I see those big eyes and that small, helpless face, I'm back in my bed at 3 a.m. with Robbie standing in the corner wearing that mask, hearing him say he wanted me to be his soft toy, as if I were a plaything he could keep in his room and hold whenever he felt lonely. And I think about the fact that I smiled at him once in the hallway, answered his messages because I felt bad for him. I wonder how many other girls have made the same mistake, been nice to the quiet kid because kindness costs nothing, and how many of them are still sleeping soundly in their beds without checking the corners of their rooms first. I still remember the way Suzanne smiled at him. We were at a crowded downtown restaurant, the kind with dim lights meant to make everyone look better than they really are. She laughed at something the waiter said, leaning in close, touching his arm, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I sat across from her, watching the scene play out like I was invisible. When the waiter walked away, she didn't even look embarrassed. She just checked her phone and asked,
Are you done eating? It's like no matter how much you eat, you're never full. Jesus.
The fight happened later that night, in our kitchen. I told her how humiliating it felt to watch my own wife flirt with every good-looking man who crossed our path. She snapped back that I was insecure and paranoid, and that maybe if I took better care of myself, I wouldn't feel so threatened. That's when I knew if I didn't do something about my weight, she was going to leave. I kept thinking of a way to lose weight fast and easy the entire night. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, I ordered Ozempic from a sketchy website I barely trusted. No prescription, no questions asked. The confirmation email felt like a secret pact I made with myself. The changes came fast, too fast. The number on the scale dropped every morning, and with it came a strange sense of relief, like I was finally fixing what was wrong with me. Suzanne noticed within a week. She said my face looked slimmer. She smiled at me again. That smile hooked me deeper than any drug. Food became an enemy. Even the smell of it made my stomach twist. I skipped meals without meaning to, then started doing it on purpose. Sleep stopped coming naturally. I would wake up multiple times a night, heart racing, convinced I had gained weight in my sleep. I started weighing myself constantly, after showers, before work, and sometimes in the middle of the night. If the number did not change, panic crawled up my spine. But soon, I started losing time. The first time I woke up on the bathroom floor, my head pounded. I assumed I had fainted. When I stood up, I saw dried blood around my lips in the mirror. It happened again a few nights later. This time, I noticed long, angry scratch marks across my stomach, deep enough to sting when I touched them. I did not remember making them. I did not remember falling either. When I looked at my reflection now, it did not look like weight loss. It looked like something had been taken from me. My eyes were sunken, my skin stretched thin over bones that had never shown before. I told myself this was the price of becoming someone Suzanne would finally want, even as my body began to feel less like mine every day. I collapsed at work on a Tuesday morning, halfway through answering an email. I had already forgotten how to start. My hands were shaking so badly that the keyboard rattled under my fingers. I remember standing up to get water, then the room tilting sharply to the left, like the floor had decided I was done using it. When I opened my eyes again, everything smelled like antiseptic and plastic. The ceiling lights above me were too white, too sharp. My body felt heavy and hollow at the same time, like there was nothing solid left inside to hold me together. A machine beside the bed beat steadily, counting something I could not feel anymore. A doctor stood near my bed, flipping through a chart with a tight expression that did not soften when he noticed I was awake. He asked me questions, my name, my age, and what medications I was taking. I tried to answer, but my throat was dry, and my thoughts moved slowly, as if they had to wade through mud to reach my mouth. When I finally admitted what I had been taking, his jaw clenched. He pulled up a chair and sat beside me, lowering his voice. He said my body was no longer burning fat. He said that phase had passed weeks ago. Now, it was consuming muscle tissue. He hesitated before adding that it had likely started breaking down organs too, prioritizing survival over anything else. I stared at him, numb, my vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I was blacking out again. Memories rushed in instead. Suzanne laughing with the bartender. Suzanne telling me I was embarrassing her. Suzanne was saying I looked sick now, saying she needed space, and saying she could not deal with my obsession anymore. I realized she had stopped checking in days ago. No missed calls, no worried messages. I had been killing myself for someone who barely noticed I was dying. The doctor kept talking about treatment plans and recovery timelines, but his words floated past me. I thought about the nights I woke up on cold tiles with blood on my mouth. The scratches on my stomach felt less like accidents and more like my body trying to escape itself. I thought about how proud I felt watching the numbers drop, even as everything else disappeared with them. I had wanted to be smaller for her, more desirable, easier to stand beside. In the process, I had erased myself piece by piece, convinced that if I reached the right number, she would finally love me the way I needed her to. Lying there, weak and broken, I finally decided to send my wife divorce notice. I'm on the path of recovery now, and along with building a healthy body, I'm also working on building enough self-esteem so I never, ever lose myself caring for people's validation. I downloaded Tinder on Valentine's Eve to escape what had to be the most depressing weekend of my adult life. I was 45 years old, eating delivery food alone from the container, asleep before 10, and waking up to the same quiet apartment each morning. A voice in my head just decided enough was enough. I hadn't been on a real date in almost 3 years. Ever since my last relationship ended, I'd been telling myself I just needed a little more time. A little time turned into months. That turned into years. My buddy Marcus had been telling me to try the apps for ages, and that Saturday, I finally caved. I matched with Elena 2 days later. Her profile photos were jaw-droppingly stunning. Nearly all of them looked like professional shots of this dark-haired woman in her late 30s. In one, she had captured herself on a beach in Europe, and another at what looked like a fashion event. She listed herself as a lingerie model who had recently moved to the city. I DM'd her, and the conversation moved fast. She was funny in a direct way I wasn't used to. She said she preferred mature men, that younger guys bored her. She called me handsome after I sent a photo. I knew it was probably a lie, but I didn't care. I hadn't been called handsome by anyone in a long time. When I suggested dinner, she surprised me.
Dinner's too formal.
She said,
I'd rather come over and keep things comfortable. Why wait? I have a feeling about you.
Every sensible part of my brain told me this was too good to be true. Men like me didn't get women who looked like her by punching keys on their phone. To top it all off, with the flirty photos and her asking to come over, the universe had to be playing a joke. But I was lonely, frustrated, and desperate. And that combination is infamous for making a man both an idiot and an expert at ignoring real threats. She confirmed for 8 o'clock the next evening. I spent the entire following day getting ready in a way I'm embarrassed to admit. I cleaned the apartment twice, ordered expensive food from a restaurant I've never been to, and even lit candles. I changed my bed sheets in the morning and again in the afternoon because I'd sat on them. By 7:30, I was standing in my kitchen in my best shirt, trying to slow my heartbeat down. The doorbell rang at 8 on the dot. I took one breath and opened the door. The woman standing on my porch was somewhere in her late 60s. She was thin and pale, wearing a dress too young for her. Her hair was dyed dark in a way that didn't even match her skin, and her face was caked in foundation that had settled into every line. Her lipstick had bled past the edges of her lips. She was smiling at me with all her teeth bare. She didn't blink, just kept grinning in a way that made the snacks churn in my stomach.
Hi, Cody. This is your Elena.
She purred in a fake, soft, melodic, almost girlish voice that made me gag. I don't remember exactly what I said, something about her having the wrong house. She giggled and said,
At least let me in once and we'd find out, love.
The embarrassment, confusion, and this creeping wrongness all hit me at once, and I told her to leave and shut the door. The silence that followed was deafening and so creepy. I could literally hear my heartbeat before Elena, if that was her real name, went completely bonkers. She started scratching at the door and rattling the doorknob, screaming at me to let her in. When I yelled at her to go away, she laughed. It got louder and more hysterical as she moved. I could track her by it as she left the porch and started circling the house, trying the side windows, then the back door. The laughter never stopped, just kept going in that same breathless, delighted way, like she was having the time of her life.
Oh, don't you want me, Cody? This body is all yours, honey. Just let your sugar plum in.
She sang from somewhere near the back of the house.
Come on, I came all this way for you. Don't be a prude.
I called the police from the kitchen with every light on, my back against the refrigerator, so nothing could come up behind me. She was still circling and laughing while I was on the phone. The dispatcher told me to stay inside, that someone was on the way. The officers arrived in about 8 minutes. The porch was empty. They walked the perimeter and found nothing. One of them looked at the scratch marks on my front door and asked if they'd been there before. I said I didn't know. They filed a report and left. I sat in my kitchen until 3 in the morning with every light on, listening to every small sound. Her Tinder account was gone by the next morning. I reported it and got an automated response. That was the last I heard of it. I deleted my own account as well. Marcus still asks if I'm back on the apps, and I tell him no and change the subject. I thought about it enough times that the details have started to feel unreliable, in the way memories do when you've turned them over too many times. I don't know whether the woman was dangerous or just disturbed, or whether the scratch marks were already there. What I know is that every light in my apartment was on that night, and I still didn't feel safe. And every time I hear laughter outside my window now, even normal laughter, or kids in the street, there's a half second before my brain catches up, where I'm back in that kitchen with my back against the refrigerator. That half second is lasting longer than it used to. I rented the cabin because I wanted silence. After the breakup, silence felt like the only thing that might fix me. No friends checking in, no city noise, and no reminders of him packed into every corner of my apartment. All I had was snow, trees, and a week to myself to clear my mind. The listing warned about limited cell service and heavy winter conditions, but I welcomed that. I told myself I would leave early if the weather turned awful. The snow turned bad faster than expected. By the second night, the road I had driven in on was completely buried. The world outside the cabin appeared sealed shut when I woke up the next morning. Thick snow piled against the porch steps, and the trees bowed under its weight. My phone showed no signal. The radio crackled, but offered nothing useful. I felt a flicker of unease, but I told myself this was what I came for. Suddenly, I noticed a snowman. It stood near the tree line, far enough back that I almost missed it. It was tall and uneven, built crudely, with no face and no decorations. What bothered me was the location. People would not drag snow that far from the cabin to build one, especially with an unclear path leading to it. I checked the ground around it. There were no footprints, no tracks, nothing disturbed the snow at all. I laughed it off, convincing myself it had been there before I arrived and that the snowfall had simply covered the tracks. Still, I kept glancing toward it while I made breakfast. Something about it felt intentional, like it had been placed there to be seen. That night, just after midnight, I heard tapping. It was soft at first, almost polite. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up in bed, heart racing, staring at the dark window. Snow brushed against the glass as the wind picked up, and I told myself that was all it was. Branches, ice. My imagination was spiraling because I was alone. The tapping stopped. I barely slept. The next morning, the snowman was closer. Now it stood halfway between the trees and the cabin. The distance it had moved was impossible to ignore. I put on my boots and stepped outside, my breath fogging the air as I circled it from a distance. The snow around it was still pristine. No signs of movement, no trail, just smooth white ground leading up to its base. I felt stupid for being scared of something so harmless. That night, the tapping came again. This time it was louder, more deliberate. It moved from one window to another, slow and methodical, like someone walking around the cabin. I stayed frozen under my blankets, barely breathing, until it stopped. I did not check outside. On the third day, The snowman stood just beyond the porch. I could see it clearly through the front window. Its shape looked more defined now, tighter packed. I noticed something dark near its center, like shadows trapped beneath the surface. I tried calling for help again, but my phone remained useless. The radio only hissed back at me. Anger finally outweighed fear. I grabbed the shovel from the porch and marched toward the snowman, my boots crunching loudly against the snow. I raised the shovel and brought it down hard, splitting the top section apart. Snow collapsed in chunks, and something tumbled free onto the ground. A scarf. It was stiff with ice, patterned with faded red stripes. I recognized the texture immediately, because I owned one just like it. Beneath it, a glove fell loose, fingers curled as if they had frozen that way. As I struck again, strands of dark hair slid out, clumped together and tangled. I dropped the shovel and backed away, nausea rising in my throat. These were not decorations. They were belongings. I ran back into the cabin and locked the door, shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. That night, I pushed furniture against the bedroom door and kept the lights on. I told myself morning would come and I would leave no matter what the road looked like. At exactly 12:16 a.m., the tapping started. It was right outside my bedroom window. I turned my head slowly, every muscle screaming at me to not look. The curtain shifted slightly, as if brushed by something heavy. The tapping continued, slower now, each knock deliberate. When I forced myself to look, I saw it. A second snowman stood inches from the glass. This one was smaller, compacted tightly, its surface smoother. Pressed into its chest was a frozen clump of hair, positioned like it was meant to be seen. I screamed and collapsed against the wall, sobbing until my throat burned. The tapping did not stop until dawn. When the sky finally lightened, I left. I forced my car through the snow until the tires caught the road beneath. I did not stop driving until I reached town and collapsed into the first cafe I saw. 3 days later, I looked it up. A woman had gone missing near the cabin the previous winter. She was last seen driving up alone after a breakup. Search teams never found her body. They never found her clothes either. I still think about that second snowman. Could it be a sign from her murderer that he had been observing me all along? I subscribed to Lily Rose's OnlyFans on a Tuesday night in March, after scrolling through my feed with nothing else to do. I was 34, lived alone, and worked as an accountant, where nobody talked about anything except spreadsheets. Her profile said she was a model who lived in the same city. We started talking a week later. Lily Rose was nothing like I expected. She hardly cared about what I could afford and was more interested in how I was. By the third week, I was checking my phone constantly, waiting for her name to appear. About a month later, she invited me over. She said she wanted to film exclusive content with someone she trusted. Her address was in a quiet suburb, and she told me she'd be waiting for me the following evening. Every rational part of my brain told me to turn her down. She might be nice, but I hardly knew her. Still, I was lonely, and Lily Rose had made me feel seen in a way nobody had in a long time. So, I went. The house was an ordinary single-story building with pale blue siding and a small porch adorned with potted plants. I rang the bell, and she answered almost immediately.
Ethan! Oh my god, please come in.
She giggled, tucking a stray strand behind her ear. I gave her an awkward smile, suddenly hyper-aware of how absolutely stunning she was. She had to be at least a decade younger than me. Inside, the living room was clean and sparsely furnished. We sat and talked for a while. All the while, my heart was doing somersaults in my chest. About 10 minutes later, she stood.
This way.
I swallowed hard and followed her down the hallway toward what I assumed was her bedroom. We were just a couple of feet from the closed door when loud footsteps echoed behind me. I turned to see an old woman standing in the kitchen doorway. She was lean and slightly stooped. Her wrinkled face resembled Lily Rose's if she were older, and her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun.
Ethan? That's Susan, my mom.
Lily Rose muttered. All the softness and warmth from earlier had vanished. Help! Before I could finish, a cloth came over my face from behind. It was damp and reeked of a harsh chemical that burned my throat. I tried to pull away, but their grip was stronger than it should have been. My vision blurred. The last thing I saw was a blank-faced Lily Rose standing in the hallway, watching me collapse. I woke up, tied to a chair, under lights so bright they made my eyes water. My head felt like it had been split open. I looked around and realized we were in an unfinished basement, with cameras on tripods positioned around me. Susan stood in front of me, studying me as if I were a piece of furniture. Lily Rose was behind one of the cameras. The women chatted about numbers and other things as they adjusted the angles.
He's up! He's up!
Lily Rose giggled. Susan glanced over, and her grin made me sick. I opened my mouth to scream, but only a whimper came out.
Relax, love. We'll keep it as quick as possible. Unfortunately for you, they pay more when it drags out and looks real.
She said, pulling out a small blade and pressing it lightly against my forearm.
Cry for the camera.
She giggled, drawing the blade across my skin. Blood welled up and ran down my elbow. I screamed and tried to pull away. The chair tipped backward, and I hit the concrete floor hard enough to see stars. Susan sighed, as if I'd inconvenienced her, and nodded at Lily Rose, who put the camera down and came over. They hauled me in the chair upright.
Don't do that.
Susan hissed, backhanding me across the face so hard my ears rang.
Ethan, we need you conscious.
They filmed the torture for what felt like hours, using tools I'd never seen before. The mother cut me in small places on my arms, shoulders, and collarbone. It wasn't life-threatening, but enough to make me bleed and beg. All the while, Lily Rose kept filming it all. At some point, I stopped screaming and just sat there, numb, certain that death was only a couple of hours away. Just when I had given up all hope, loud banging started from somewhere upstairs. I could hear shouting and movements. Seconds later, the basement door burst open, and officers flooded the stairs with their guns drawn, shouting commands. The mother lunged for the nearest camera, but an officer grabbed her and forced her to the ground. Lily Rose just stood there frozen, still holding the camera. Someone cut the zip ties around my wrists and ankles, and an EMT wrapped something around my arm. I couldn't process what was happening. One of the officers was talking to me, but I couldn't hear him over the ringing in my ears. Later, at the hospital, a detective told me one of their neighbors reported the ladies after noticing men going into that house, but never coming out. They'd been watching for 2 weeks before they got a warrant. The search turned up more cameras, hard drives full of content I was told I didn't want to see, and a section of disturbed concrete in the basement floor. When they dug it up, they found human remains. Bodies were buried beneath right where I'd been sitting. Susan and Lily Rose were arrested. The trial lasted 6 months. I testified twice and had to watch parts of the footage. The mother got life without parole, while Lily Rose got 25 years. The prosecutor argued she'd been coerced by her mother since she was 16, but I couldn't feel sorry for her. I'm 36 now. The scars have faded, but I can still see them. I moved to a different city, started therapy 3 times a week, and deleted every social media account. Yet nothing helps me from living the horror all over in my head again and again. Each time, my imagination makes it worse. I downloaded Tinder 3 months after my divorce was finalized at 11 p.m. on a Friday. because the apartment felt painfully quiet. I told myself it was just for distraction. I'd just have casual dinners, maybe partake in some harmless flirting, but absolutely nothing would follow me home. I matched with Daniel on a Tuesday evening. His profile was basic, with only one photo of him in beach shorts and a fishing rod, with a bio that read, "Recently located, looking for something real. If you're a catfish, at least be a magical one." He was 42 and worked as a project manager in a local firm. He messaged first, which I appreciated, and the conversation moved easily without any of the usual awkward nonsense. Our first date was at a wine bar in Midtown. He was already seated when I arrived and stood when he saw me come in. Much to my relief, he was the exact lean guy from his profile photo, with gray shoulder-length hair, a thick beard, and a small ring in his nose. We talked for 3 hours. He remembered I'd mentioned having a bad week and asked about it before we even ordered. He laughed at things that were actually funny and listened in that rare way where you can tell someone is actually processing what you said and not just waiting for their turn to talk. When he walked me to my car, he smiled and said, "I've been waiting to meet someone exactly like you, Mira." I laughed it off at the time, as one of those good first date closure people often say. The second date was dinner at a place he'd clearly researched because he knew I didn't eat red meat. He brought up small things I'd said weeks earlier in our messages I'd already forgotten. It felt attentive. I told my friend Daisy about it, and she said it sounded like a green flag. By the end of the second dinner, Daniel was talking about destiny and how certain people were meant to find each other. You know, I almost didn't make a Tinder account at all, but something made me just download it the night we matched. I smiled and changed the subject. We were on our third date when he brought up marriage. "Mira, I am at a point in my life where I know exactly what I want, and I'm really not interested in wasting time getting there." I told him gently that I wasn't looking for anything serious, that I was still finding my footing after my divorce. He simply grinned down his nose, as if he were looking at a kid trying to play adult. "You don't know what you need yet," he said. "But that's okay. I'll be very patient with you." The way he said it made my palm sweat. So, I canceled our fourth date. I texted him, saying I didn't think we were a good match. He responded 3 times within the hour. Each message was longer and more intense than the last. It got to the point where I had to stop replying. The messages kept coming anyway. At first, they were almost reasonable, like he missed talking to me. Soon enough, he started trying random video chats at 2 and 3 in the morning. When I wouldn't pick up, he'd send long texts explaining how I was making a mistake, and he wouldn't let me. I blocked his number, thinking maybe now he'd get the hint and move on. An hour later, a photo arrived through Instagram from an account I didn't recognize. It was my gym, taken from the parking lot. I was visible in the background through the window, on the treadmill. Another one was from my office building. One after that was the cafe on the corner of my street, where I went every morning. Each photo had a caption like, "Miss you, bae. Thinking of you. Just making sure you're safe." I went to the police. The officer I spoke to was patient, took my statement, but explained that nothing Daniel had done technically constituted a crime yet. I drove home that night with my eyes on the rearview mirror the whole way. The last message he sent before I locked down every account I had was, "I just want to protect my future wife." That evening, I came home from work and noticed something off about my front door. The hinge on the right side looked different. I leaned in close and saw fresh screws. The metal was still bright, without a trace of rust that had been there since I moved in. With a shaking hand, I pushed the door open slowly. Everything in my apartment looked the same, except for my kitchen table. Where I ate breakfast every morning sat a framed photograph I'd never seen before. I walked toward it, and my stomach dropped. It was a wedding photo. Daniel was in a groom suit. Beside him, my face, cut from somewhere and edited badly, was pasted to a woman in a bridal attire. He had scrawled at the bottom in filthy, jagged handwriting, "Till death do us part." My throat went dry, and my heartbeat picked up. I gulped as I looked around to check if anyone was with me in there before I put the frame back down and backed out of the apartment. I called the police from my car. They came, took the photo as evidence, and changed my locks. A detective was assigned to the case. Daniel was located 2 days later and brought in for questioning. He told them we were engaged, that I invited him in, and the photo was a gift. I'm 40 now. I got a fresh job and moved cities. I have a security system and a doorbell camera. Daniel was ordered to stay away from me, which he has, as far as I know. I think about the version of him I met on the first date sometimes. The guy who stood up when I walked in, laughed at the right moments, and asked about my bad week. I wonder how much of it was real, and how much was theatricality. I never re-downloaded Tinder. I probably never will. I had been clean for 2 weeks. That might not sound like much to most people, but to me, it felt like walking around with exposed nerves. Every sound was too loud, every thought too sharp. My therapist kept telling me that the best way to handle withdrawals is to distract my mind until they pass. She told me to go for a walk or do some activity whenever the urge became too strong. That night, staying inside my apartment felt worse than the cold outside. I layered up in a hoodie, gloves, and snow boots, then stepped out onto the street. The neighborhood was dead quiet, the kind of silence you only get late at night when snow starts swallowing sound. The air burned my lungs in a way that was almost comforting. After a few minutes, my hands stopped shaking, and my thoughts began to slow. For the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe again. About 5 minutes into the walk, a light snowfall began. Large flakes drifted down lazily, sticking to the pavement and my sleeves. I considered turning back, but I kept going. I told myself I was not scared of snow. I kept repeating in my head that nothing will scare me now. 10 minutes into the walk, I stopped under a streetlight to light a cigarette. I had flicked the lighter, bringing it close to my cigarette, seconds away from lighting it, when the sounds of someone's manic laughter made me jump. It was distant at first, echoing faintly through the empty street. It was not loud, just enough to make me pause. I looked around, expecting to see someone nearby, maybe a couple walking or a drunk person heading home. There was no one. The laughter came again, uneven and breathy, like it was being forced out between shallow breaths. I told myself it was my nerves acting up. I ignored it and started walking again, a little faster now, when I noticed movement beneath a streetlight on my left. Something shifted against the white ground. From a distance, it almost looked playful. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. I pulled out my phone and zoomed in. There was a man. He was bald, bareheaded, and wearing nothing but thin pajamas. He was lying flat on the frozen ground, sweeping his arms and legs back and forth, carving snow angels into the ice. His laughter matched the sound I had been hearing. It came in sharp bursts, followed by wheezing breaths. What stood out to me the most was that he was not shivering. His skin was red from the cold, but he looked comfortable. Every instinct in my body told me to leave. I did not want him to know I had seen him, so I tried to walk past quietly. Keeping my eyes forward while watching him from my peripheral vision, I placed each step carefully. On my 5th step, the snow crunched loudly beneath my boot, and the laughter stopped immediately. The man went completely still, his arms spread wide as he stared up at the sky. I froze where I stood. 10 seconds passed, maybe more. My heart pounded so hard that I was sure he could hear it. We both remained statues for seconds. Then he began moving again and laughing again, continuing to make another snow angel. I let out a shaky breath and started walking. I had only gone a few steps when the street became unnaturally quiet. The sound of his laughter was gone. Again. I looked back, and the man was sitting up now, his legs crossed, staring directly at me. His eyes were wide and unblinking, and his smile was stretched too far across his face.
You think I didn't see you before?
He asked calmly. We maintained eye contact for a while, and then I began running. I did not look back. I did not scream. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. Behind me, I heard his bare feet slapping against the snow. His laughter followed me, louder now, and filled with excitement. I ran into the woods and hid behind a thick bush, pressing my body into the snow. I pulled my hood tight and forced myself to stay still. My teeth chattered uncontrollably, and I had to cover my mouth with my glove. He entered the woods shortly after. I heard him walking slowly, dragging his feet on purpose. He talked while he searched, his voice drifting between the trees as if he were relaxed. He told me not to hide. He said he was bored with fake angels. He said he wanted to make a real one now. He spoke calmly, describing exactly what he planned to do once he found me. He explained it the way someone talks about a routine they had done many times before. I stayed there for over an hour. Eventually, his footsteps faded and the woods went silent again. I did not move until my legs were completely numb. When I finally got home, I locked the door behind me and sat on the floor until morning. After that night, I never went outside during snowfall again. 2 weeks later, my neighbor knocked on my door. She asked if I had heard about the body found in the woods. It belonged to a girl who worked late nights at a bar nearby. Suddenly, that man's face flashed in front of my eyes before my neighbor even finished speaking. She said the police described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they'd ever seen. Someone had carefully carved the skin on the girl's back and spread it outward, hanging her up in a tree, almost like wings. They called it an angel. That was when I realized the man in the snow had not been playing that night. He had been practicing. I'd been delivering pizzas for Marco's for 6 months, and I'd learned which neighborhoods to avoid after dark. This one was borderline, but it was just past 9 p.m. and the house looked normal enough. It was a single-story cottage with pale yellow siding and a porch light on. Newspapers were piling up by the steps, but nothing particularly screamed danger. I grabbed the pizza and headed up the cracked walkway, humming under my breath. The man answered before I even rang the doorbell, as if he'd been waiting right there behind the door. He was maybe 50, wearing a stained undershirt and sweatpants. He had thinning gray hair and his thick glasses magnified his eyes. He smiled when he saw me, but he was too wide and eager.
One large pepperoni.
I said, holding out the box.
That'll be $18.50.
Instead of taking the pizza like a normal person, the guy just stood there, staring at me. His eyes traveled down from my face to my chest. I was wearing my work polo and jeans, but the way he looked at me made me feel like I was naked.
You're pretty.
He whistled.
And how old might you be?
Thanks. $18.50, sir?
No, really. How old?
He leaned against the doorframe, stepping so close I could smell his nasty breath.
You look young. 20? 21?
He chuckled, flashing his bare teeth. The braces made me gag. They were yellowish, with patches of something green and red between them.
22.
I shifted the pizza box, trying to create some space between us. The porch suddenly felt way too narrow.
Sir, I need to get back. Other deliveries are waiting.
You got a boyfriend?
My heartbeat picked up.
Sir?
It's just a question.
His smile stayed fixed, but his tone had an edge.
You live around here?
No. Can I have the payment, please?
He finally reached for his wallet, but his eyes never left me.
Those jeans fit you perfectly, you know. You should wear things like that more often. Shows off your curves pretty well.
My skin crawled. I tried to laugh it off to make it less weird.
Thanks. If you'd just...
You live alone? He pulled out a 20, but held on to it when I reached for it. Got roommates or family?
I live with people.
It was a lie, but I didn't feel like sharing anything about myself.
Sir, I really need to go.
I emphasized. He nodded and started counting out change slowly, 1 quarter at a time, placing each coin carefully in my palm. His fingers were damp and cold. They lingered on my hand with each coin.
You know, I get lonely out here.
He said quietly, still holding my hand.
My wife died 2 years ago. It's just me now.
I pulled my hand back, stepping away.
I'm sorry for your loss. Here's your pizza.
He still didn't take it. Instead, he leaned even closer. His breath was hot on my face.
Why don't you come inside for a minute, sweetheart?
He said. His voice had dropped lower, like we were sharing a secret.
Just for a minute. I want to show you something.
Every alarm in my head went off.
No, thank you. I need to leave.
Oh, come on. It's my wife's necklace. Real pearls. It's worth a ton.
He gestured toward the dark interior of the house. I couldn't see anything past the doorway.
I'll give it to you. All you gotta do is come inside and do me one small favor.
The way he said favor made my stomach turn. I shoved the pizza box at him and ran. I could hear his footsteps behind me, but I was already dashing toward the car.
I paid for the pizza. The least you could do is be grateful. Come inside for 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking.
He yelled, but I didn't stop.
You fucking tease! You come here dressed like that, smiling at me, and then you act like you're too good? You led me on. You're a liar. A cock tease.
His voice followed me down the walkway. He was screaming. I fumbled with my car keys, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I could hear his footsteps on the porch. I yanked the car door open, threw myself inside, and slammed it shut. I hit the lock button just as he made it to the car. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the keys in the ignition. He was at my window now. His face was pressed against the glass. His mouth was twisted, and his eyes were wild. He was pounding on the window with his fist.
You fucking bitch! I know where you work. I'll find you. I'll fucking find you.
The engine started. I threw it in reverse and gunned it, tires screeching. I didn't look back until I was 3 blocks away. I pulled over on a side street and just sat there. My whole body was shaking. I couldn't catch my breath. I kept seeing his face pressed against my window as he hurled profanities at me. I called my manager Tony and told him what happened. I quit 2 days later. Tony left voicemails saying I was unprofessional. I could hardly care. I'm 23 now, working at a coffee shop where I don't have to go to strangers' houses, where there are always other people around. But I still think about that night, about how close I became to being dragged inside, and what would have happened if he could manage it. Jade started at the company about a year after I did. He was in IT and got the cubicle next to mine. At first glance, he seemed like an ordinary, quiet guy who was soft-spoken and mostly kept to himself. But there was something off about him. The cubicle walls were paper-thin, so I heard more of his life than I wanted to. Specifically, I heard his wife. Lucy called him constantly, multiple times a day, always screaming. I could hear her voice through the phone, shrill and vicious, even when he held it away from his ear.
I don't know why I even married you.
I didn't mean to upset you, Lucy.
That's all you ever do. Exist and disappoint.
I'm sorry.
It was always like that, or even worse. The calls were getting so brutal that one day during lunch, I couldn't help asking him about it.
Oh, Lucy's fine. She's just going through a lot of stress at work and her mother's sick.
He smiled sadly, picking at his sandwich. That doesn't mean she can pick on you like this. I think you should talk it out, dude.
I tried. It's complicated. I love her too much to watch her walk away, Samuel.
I didn't push. It was none of my business. But The calls got worse. One afternoon, she called him a pathetic excuse for a man, loud enough that people 3 cubicles over could hear. Jade just sat there, with his shoulders hunched, whispering apologies into the phone. Suddenly, a week before Valentine's, he stopped showing up to work. Initially, we figured he was sick or something, but by day 4, HR was calling his emergency contacts. Finally, after nearly a week, he walked into the office, looking like a ghost of himself. I almost didn't recognize him. His hair was greasy and uncombed, with dark circles under his eyes like bruises. His clothes were wrinkled, and his shirt was buttoned wrong. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 days. I asked if he was okay when he sat down at his desk. He apologized for not calling in and told me his wife had left him. We had a huge fight, and she said she was done, packed a bag, and left. He said he couldn't function, or eat, or sleep, just kept thinking about her and everything he did wrong. But today, I woke up and decided I needed to take care of myself. Made myself a proper meal. Felt good to cook again. Really therapeutic, actually. Taking something raw and making it into something beautiful and nourishing. His eyes had this distant look. Lucy always said I couldn't do anything right. I wish she could see this. I told him that it was good and he needed to take care of himself. Lunchtime came, and Jade pulled out his lunchbox. It wasn't his usual Tupperware with sad leftovers, but a nice insulated bag. He opened it, and the smell hit me immediately. It was something rich and savory, with perfectly seasoned meat. Inside were 2 thick steaks, cooked to a perfect medium rare, pink in the middle, seared on the outside, with what looked like a red wine reduction sauce. That looks incredible, Jade. Thank you. I spent a lot of time on it. Had to be respectful with the meat, you know? He cut into one with a plastic knife, the meat tender and juicy. Here, freshly grass-fed. Try some. He cut a piece and held it out on his fork. I took it and ate the piece. It was incredible, tender and flavorful, seasoned perfectly with rosemary and garlic. It was easily the best steak I'd ever tasted. I asked what cut it was. Jade grinned ear to ear and said, "It's a special kind I've been preparing for days now." He took another bite, chewing slowly with his eyes closed. For the first time since I'd known him, Jade looked peaceful and even proud. I felt happy for him, until the afternoon came, and 3 police officers walked into our office. They went straight to Jade's cubicle and told him he needed to come with them. They cuffed him while everyone watched. As they passed my desk, he turned and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but I really didn't want to taste it alone. I hope you enjoyed it. Please savor the taste, because that's all that's left of her now." My stomach dropped. 20 minutes later, 2 detectives arrived to interview everyone. They pulled me aside and asked what exactly I'd eaten for lunch. I told them steak, really good steak. The detectives said Jade's wife had been missing for 6 days, and they'd found remains in his apartment that morning. In his mixer, his refrigerator, and packaged into meal prep containers. He said the medical examiner believed Jade had been consuming the remains over the past several days, cooking and eating them to dispose of the body. I made it to the bathroom before I threw up, kept throwing up until there was nothing left. They tested what was left in Jade's lunchbox and confirmed it was human tissue. I'd eaten a piece of her thigh. That was 3 weeks ago. Jade confessed to everything. Told police he'd strangled Lucy during an argument, panicked about disposing of the body, and decided the only way was to make her disappear completely. He'd spent 5 days butchering, cooking, and eating her. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. I'm in therapy twice a week. I can't eat meat anymore, or even smell it cooking without my stomach turning. I've lost 15 pounds and can't sleep. I keep tasting that bite of steak and seeing Jade's peaceful smile. The worst part was that I told him it was delicious, and sometimes, late at night, when I can't sleep, I remember exactly how it tasted. I hate myself for not knowing, but most of all, I hate that some small, sick part of me understands why he looked so peaceful that day. He'd finally silenced her screaming, and he'd shared his victory meal with the only person in the office who'd been kind to him. I had already been told no by 4 doctors by the time I found the Telegram post. They all said the same thing in different voices: lifestyle changes, diet, exercise. One of them smiled like he was doing me a favor. Online was worse. I made the mistake of posting in a weight loss forum, asking for advice. The comments turned into jokes within minutes. Memes, screenshots, people telling me I looked like I belonged in a warehouse, not a gym. They were not wrong about the warehouse. I lifted boxes for a living. 34 years old, back always aching, body everyone felt entitled to comment on. That's when I saw the post. Authentic Ozempic, no prescription, half the price, serious buyers only. I stared at it for a long time before messaging. The seller replied immediately, like he had been waiting. Cash only, meet tonight. Downtown alley behind a closed pawn shop. Something in my chest tightened, but desperation has a way of making fear feel negotiable. I told myself it would be quick. Buy it, leave, start over tomorrow. The alley smelled like rot and piss. Trash bags were piled against brick walls, split open by rats. One flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, doing more harm than good. I checked my phone. No new messages. I told myself to wait 5 minutes more. That was when I heard footsteps. 2 men stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking the narrow exit. I did not hear them approach. They were already too close. One of them smiled, slow and knowing. The other kept his hands in his jacket pockets. "Caleb," the smiling one said. My stomach dropped. I had not told the seller my real name. He stepped closer and poked my belly with 2 fingers, like he was testing dough. "So this is what all the fuss is about," he said, laughing. "Man, you weren't kidding. People like you are easy marks." I tried to back up, but the wall was right there. The second guy moved in behind me, close enough that I could feel his breath on my neck. They knew why I was there. They mocked the doctors who wouldn't help. They joked about how much weight I could lose if I just stopped eating altogether. I realized there was never any Ozempic. They took everything first. My wallet disappeared into the smiling one's jacket. My phone was ripped from my hand before I could even think about calling for help. My backpack followed, dumped out and searched like I was nothing more than loose change. I stood there, pressed against the brick wall, heart hammering, telling myself it was over. They got what they wanted. They would let me go. They did not. The one who had been quiet the whole time reached into his pocket and pulled out a syringe. Clear barrel, thin needle. He held it up to the alley light, like it was something precious. "Relax," he said. "This is what you came for, right? Ozempic, half the price." My stomach dropped. I shook my head, backing away, even though there was nowhere to go. He stepped closer. He said if I wanted to walk out of the alley alive, I needed to pay more. A lot more. Otherwise, he would inject me right there and let me deal with whatever happened next. I knew then they were never selling anything. They were hunting. The smiling one grabbed my arm, squeezing hard enough to make my vision blur. He laughed about how desperate people trusted needles from strangers, about how easy it was when someone hated their body enough. I felt the cold tip of the syringe brush my skin, and panic exploded through me. Then, somewhere far away, a police siren wailed. It was faint, distant, probably not even headed this way, but it made them hesitate. I could see worries in their eyes as they glanced at each other. I shoved the smiling one with everything I had left. He stumbled into the dumpster, swearing. I ducked under the other man's arm and ran. My foot hit wet pavement, and I went down hard, skin tearing, breath punched out of me. Hands grabbed at my jacket, but I kicked blindly, scrambled up, and bolted toward the street. Headlights flooded my vision. Horns blared. I did not stop until I was across traffic, stumbling onto the sidewalk, bleeding and gasping like I had just crawled out of a grave. They did not follow. At home, I locked the door and slid down against it, shaking so badly my teeth rattled. My reflection in the bathroom mirror barely looked real. Bruises bloomed across my stomach and arms. Dirt streaked my face. Blood clung to my knuckles. I stared at myself for a long time. I had gone out that night, thinking the danger was a fake drug. I had not realized the real threat was my desperation. The way it had made me willing to walk into a dark alley and trust strangers with my body. I turned off the light and stood there in the dark, understanding something that made my chest ache. People like them are everywhere, waiting, and all it takes is wanting change badly enough to stop caring how you get it. I left Rachel's party around 1 a.m. with 3 margaritas in my system and my windows cracked to let the cold air sober me up. The back roads were empty, which was exactly why I took them. It meant no police intervention or drivers honking to get a pass. I was doing fine until I came across the 2 kids standing under a streetlight that kept flickering. The boy looked to be around 11, and the girl was maybe 10. They weren't waving or sobbing or doing anything kids should do when they're standing on a dark road at 1 in the morning. They were just standing there, like they'd been waiting. I should have kept driving, but something about how still they were made me pull over. The passenger window was already down, making it easier for the girl to lean in.
Can you take us home?
Where are your parents?
We're lost. Can we get in?
I looked around to observe how only tall, looming trees were the only living creatures in sight.
Where do you live? I can ring the cops.
We'll tell you where to turn. Just take us home.
Before I could say anything else, they opened the back door, climbed in, and buckled themselves without being asked. I watched them in the rearview mirror, trying to figure out what felt wrong. It had to be their clothes, given how outdated they looked. The boy wore khakis and a polo that seemed to belong to a 90s catalog. The girl had on a denim jumper with flowers on the pockets. Everything looked clean and pressed, but old somehow.
So where am I going?
I asked, putting the car in drive.
Just keep going straight. I'll tell you where to turn.
I shrugged and hit the gas. 5 minutes passed, and the boy leaned forward between the seats, staring at the dashboard.
How fast are you going?
45.
Are you tired?
A little.
How much did you drink?
I glanced at him in the mirror.
Excuse me?
The girl grabbed his arm.
You're not supposed to yet.
Not supposed to what?
Neither of them answered. The boy sat back, but his eyes stayed on me through the mirror. His stare was flat and curious, like he was studying me. I tried to shake off the chills crawling up my spine, asked them their names, how they got lost, and what their parents did. They barely gave me anything except instructions.
Turn left at the next light.
I did, and realized that we were heading away from the neighborhood I knew. As the houses got farther apart, I could see more trees and fewer streetlights. At a stoplight, I looked in the rearview mirror. The kids were sitting there, but something was off. Their faces looked dimmer, like the light was avoiding them. I blinked hard. When I looked again, everything seemed normal.
Do you remember this road?
Should I?
The girl elbowed him.
Stop! She doesn't remember yet.
My hands tightened on the wheel.
Remember what?
Turn right up here.
She ignored my question. We turned onto a road I didn't recognize. It was narrow with zero paint on the asphalt and only trees pressing in on both sides. The headlights barely cut through the dark. My heartbeat picked up.
Where are we going?
My voice came out higher than I meant it to.
Almost there.
They started whispering to each other now. I couldn't make out the words, but their tone was urgent. They were arguing about something.
Do you believe accidents can replay themselves?
The girl suddenly asked.
Or what?
Slow down. It's right here.
I squinted, and a gate with old rusted iron bars appeared on the left. It was pitch dark beyond the fence, and rows of shapes I recognized as headstones.
It's a cemetery.
I gasped as I slowed to a crawl.
Stop the car.
My foot hovered over the brake. Everything in me screamed to keep driving, but I couldn't. It was like something else was controlling my leg. As the car stopped, the kids fell silent. The girl pointed through the fence at a single grave visible in the moonlight. It was close to the road. The headstone was small and plain. It held no name I could see from here, but a date was carved into the stone. It was tonight, 10 years ago.
This is where it happened.
My head started pounding as images flashed. I remembered headlights, my car swerving, brakes screeching, and two small figures in the road.
God, no!
You were young and drunk that night. You didn't see us until it was too late.
No!
My voice broke. I could barely breathe.
You were walking home. You came around the curve too fast.
The memories hit me all at once. I could feel the impact, hear the sound. I remember getting out and seeing them on the asphalt and choosing to drive away. The news reports never identified the two kids. The case was cold from the beginning. I looked in the mirror. The kids were staring at me with those flat, empty eyes. I was shaking.
We just wanted to go home.
I slammed my foot on the gas. The car lurched forward. I didn't look back. Couldn't look back. I just drove, taking turns randomly until I couldn't see the cemetery anymore. I finally pulled onto the shoulder miles away, still trembling like a leaf. I sat there trying to breathe, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. That's when my eyes fell on the rear window, and I screamed. Small, muddy handprints were smeared across the inside of the glass, like someone had been pressing their palms against it to push through and get out. Or maybe trying to get home. I drove straight to the police station and told them everything. They pulled up the case, and it was still an unsolved hit and run. Emma and Jacob Martinez were twins, walking home from a friend's house. I'm waiting for the trial now, but what keeps me up isn't the prison time. It's knowing that those kids are still out there, standing under that streetlight, waiting for someone to take them home, and wondering who's going to pull over next. The order came through at 11:45. They wanted one large pepperoni, breadsticks, and a can of Sprite delivered to Oak Hill Old Cemetery. I stared at my phone, thinking someone was messing with me, but the system confirmed cash on delivery, and I needed the money for the month's rent. The cemetery was 10 minutes out, past the old part of town where half the streetlights didn't work. I'd driven past it before, but had never been inside. The GPS took me to the main entrance through the big iron gates, which stood wide open. The path inside was narrow gravel that crunched under my tires. My headlights swept across rows of headstones. Some were so old and weathered you couldn't read the names anymore. As I went deeper, the path grew rougher, and tree branches scraped against my windows. My palms grew sweaty at the sight of endless darkness and headstones, and I couldn't see a single soul out there. I cursed whoever thought making me drive in the middle of the night was funny, and was about to turn around when I saw someone near an old mausoleum, waving at me. I pulled over and grabbed the order. The guy was maybe 40, wearing jeans and a dark hoodie. He was breathing hard, like he'd been running. He took the boxes from me, but instead of reaching for his wallet, he started staring at me. His face was pale and slick with sweat, and his stares were making me uneasy. Dude? The money? I said, shuffled on my shoe and looked elsewhere. That's when I noticed his hands were covered in blood that was dripping onto the gravel. Wide-eyed, I looked over his shoulder to see more blood smeared across the mausoleum wall behind him.
Not what you think, buddy. I cut it climbing a fence.
He chuckled, sensing my horror.
How much do I owe you?
He pulled out crumpled muddy bills from his pocket. When he handed them over, his fingers left red smears on the 20. Some blood even dripped onto the pizza box. I took the money quickly. My stomach was turning. Everything about this felt wrong. I was heading back to my car when I heard footsteps from behind the mausoleum. I turned slightly and saw another man limping around the corner. He was slightly older, maybe 50, and was dragging his left leg, using the wall to keep himself upright. His jeans were torn at the thigh with a red rag tied around them, soaked completely through with blood.
You got it?
He grunted.
Right here.
The first guy replied. The second guy nodded and started limping forward. His face was drenched in sweat, and his eyes had this unfocused, glassy look. He was breathing in short, raspy gasps that didn't sound right.
We just need the food,
the first guy said to me.
Gotta eat before it gets worse.
The second guy took another step, and his leg gave out. He collapsed onto the gravel, the rag shifted, and I saw the wound underneath. It was a massive gash, deep enough that I could see white bone underneath. The edges looked ragged and torn, like something had ripped into him. I dropped the bloody 20 and bolted to my car. My heart was pounding as I slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. Behind me, the men started screaming for me to come back. I threw it in reverse. The tires spun on the loose gravel as I drove. I felt something soft give way under my back tire. It was a sickening thump, and the car had lurched, but I didn't stop to check. I just wanted to get away. I tore out of there as branches whipped against my windows. The whole way down the path, I could hear screaming behind me.
You left us! You left us here to bleed!
I made it back to the main road and kept driving until I was back in town with streetlights and other cars around me. I pulled over because the odor of blood and rot was filling my entire car. It had gotten so unbearable that I was gagging. I pulled into a gas station parking lot and got out to check my tires. The back right one had something dark smeared all across the treads. It could be blood mixed with bits of fabric or maybe flesh. I couldn't tell, and I didn't want to get any closer. I threw up right there next to my car, and later called the police from inside the gas station. Told them everything. They said they'd send someone to check it out. I drove home with all my windows down, trying to get rid of the smell. It didn't work. For 3 days, my car reeked of blood so badly I couldn't stand to sit inside it. I finally had to pay someone to deep clean the whole interior. The cops called me back 2 days later. They'd searched Oak Hill Cemetery top to bottom and found nothing unusual. They asked if I was sure about the address, if maybe I'd gotten confused in the dark and gone to the wrong place. But I know what I saw and drove through. I am Olivia Bennett, and this happened about 7 months after I moved out because I thought independence would make me stronger. I'd always wanted to study medicine, and living alone felt like the kind of sacrifice serious people made. Most nights, Instagram was the only thing that reminded me I wasn't living under a rock. So, I was pretty active on Instagram. The follow request came at around 11:30 on a Wednesday night while I was studying for a biology exam at my desk. The account was @Emily. It looked like a bot account because it didn't have a profile picture, posts, or followers. I should have declined it immediately. But I was 19, tired, and hardly thinking straight. And I'd gotten dozens of random follow requests that week from people starting new accounts or bots or whatever. I accepted it without a second thought and went back to my notes on cellular respiration. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. @Emily had posted a story. I tapped it more out of curiosity than anything else. The image loaded, and my stomach dropped. It was unmistakably my house. The photo was taken from the street, but my bedroom window was visible on the second floor. The curtains were open, and the lights were on. And if you squinted closely enough, you could see my shadow under the glow of the desk lamp beside the edge of my bookshelf. Before I could wrap my head around it, a message came through. "You should turn that off now, Olivia." My hands started shaking, and my mouth went dry. I hurriedly got up from my desk, turned off the lamp, and closed the curtains. My room went dark, except for the glow from my laptop screen. I stood there in the darkness, trying to process what was happening. Right then, my phone buzzed again. @Emily had posted another story. I opened it with my heart hammering in my chest and nearly screamed. The story refreshed. It was my house again, but from the inside this time. The photo was taken low to the ground, like someone was crouched in my hallway with the camera pointed straight at my bedroom door. My chest tightened. They were inside my house, close enough to move through it, take photos, and post them while I stood frozen in my dark room, afraid to make a sound. I hurriedly ran and locked my bedroom door before grabbing my phone and dialing 911. I kept pressing my head against the door to listen for sounds as the call connected and the operator answered. I whispered that someone was in my house. She told me to find a place to hide and stay on the line. I crawled into my closet, pulled the door shut, and sat there in the dark with my phone pressed to my ear and my free hand over my mouth to keep myself from making noise. I could hear soft shuffling in the hallway, followed by a low giggle that made my stomach twist. The operator kept talking to me while she told me the police were on their way, and I stayed curled up in that closet, counting my breaths and flinching at every sound the house made. At some point, I checked Instagram again. The account had gone offline, but hadn't taken the photos down. By the time the police arrived, I was sobbing so hard I could hardly speak straight. An officer consoled me while another searched the entire house. They found my back door unlocked, but everything else was in its rightful place. They took my phone and looked at the Instagram account. @Emily was still there, but both stories had expired. One officer took screenshots anyway and asked if I knew anyone named Emily. I told them I didn't. They filed a report and told me to change my locks and install cameras. One officer suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days. I called my parents and they drove over to get me at 2 in the morning. I never set foot in that house again. My parents moved my stuff out over the next week while I stayed with them. We put the house on the market a month later. I completed pre-med and chose a university in another state. I will graduate in 6 months, but the cops have yet to trace them. I don't think they ever will. The @Emily account disappeared completely the next day, as if it had never existed. They tracked the IP address to a public library 3 towns over, but the security footage from that night had already been recorded over by the time they checked. I have tried putting it past me and moving on, but the episode still lingers somewhere in the back of my mind, and I can't help but replay the night over and over in my head. Who were they? What did they want? How did they know exactly where my house and room were? I wonder if they're still out there and have found someone else to follow. Someone whose bedroom window is visible from the street and who accepts follow requests from blank accounts at 11:30 at night without thinking twice. I saw her around 11 p.m. on Route 9, standing with her thumb out. She was maybe 25, wearing jeans and a gray hoodie. Her left shoe was missing, and she looked pale and shaken in my headlights. My mom raised me to help people in need, so I pulled over without second thoughts. She jogged up with this grateful smile, thanking me over and over as she explained how her boyfriend threw her out after a fight.
Oh, I've been standing here for over an hour.
She said as she climbed in.
My sister lives in Millbrook. She'd let me crash. I'm Lucy, by the way.
Paul. I pulled back onto the highway, and she settled in, pulling her hood down. She was cute in an endearing sort of way, with brown hair that was stunning. I couldn't believe some jerk did that to her. Within 10 minutes, I felt comfortable enough to share where I worked, where my family lived, and crack a few jokes. She laughed at all of them, made comments about songs on the radio, said I was one of the good ones for stopping.
So, do you have a girlfriend?
Lucy sang. No.
What? You're kidding. Are all the girls around you idiots?
I blushed slightly. As Lucy rested her hand on my thigh, I looked down to see where her palms were sliding when I noticed the one show she still had on. Her right foot was propped against the dashboard, and the sole was covered in dark stains that looked thicker and stickier than dirt. It was almost black in the dim light from the dashboard. She followed my eyes and laughed.
It's just roadkill. I stepped on a dead possum. Gross, right?
She asked if I had napkins. I told her to check the glove box. She rummaged around while I kept driving, but something felt off. The stains didn't look like roadkill. They looked fresh. As she started wiping, a nasty metallic smell hit me. It filled the car so fast I almost gagged. I started to say maybe I should pull over so she could clean her shoe outside, but before I could finish the sentence, pain exploded in my left thigh. I looked down and saw the box cutter in her hand. The blade was buried in my leg, and she was pressing it deeper.
Don't scream. Keep driving, Paul.
Her voice was sickeningly calm and friendly, as if we were discussing the weather, when I could hardly breathe. Blood was already soaking through my jeans. My foot spasmed on the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward. She twisted the blade slightly, and I screamed.
I said keep driving.
She pulled the blade out, and I gasped, stars exploding across my vision.
See? You can be smart when you want to be.
My hands were shaking so hard on the wheel that I could barely hold it straight. Blood was running down my leg, pooling in my shoe. I tried to think through the pain, tried to figure out what to do. We were on a dark stretch of highway with no other cars in sight. She told me to take the next exit as she leaned closer and explained it to me.
Men like you pull over, seeing a woman all by herself. What now? Gonna stop without thinking again? Thinking you can use her circumstances for your advantage?
I kept nodding, trying to look compliant, while my mind raced. Ahead, I could see orange construction cones narrowing the lanes. Headlights were coming from the opposite direction.
Okay, I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't hurt me anymore.
I sobbed. Lucy relaxed slightly, settling back into her seat. I kept driving toward the construction zone. The cones were getting closer. I waited until the oncoming traffic was maybe 50 feet away and slammed on the brakes hard. The car screeched, tires screamed against asphalt. Lucy lurched forward as I yanked the wheel hard right. We careened off the road, smashing through orange cones. The shoulder was gravel and dirt. The car bounced violently, fishtailing. The airbags exploded. White fabric slammed into my face, stunning me. My chest hurt. My leg was on fire. But I was alive. Lucy was screaming too. The box cutter had flown from her hand somewhere in the impact. I shoved the deflating airbag out of my face, fumbled with my seatbelt, and threw myself out of the car. My leg buckled, and I went down, but I could hear voices. Someone had seen the crash. I screamed for help as two guys came running from a stopped truck. Behind me, I heard my car door open, followed by footsteps on gravel. I turned and saw her standing there, blood on her face from the airbag, staring at the approaching men. For a second, she looked right at me. Then, she turned and ran into the darkness beyond the construction lights. The guys reached me. One was already on his phone, calling 911. The other pressed something against my leg, trying to stop the bleeding. They asked what happened and who that was. I couldn't answer. I was shaking too hard. The cops found her shoe in my car later. They ran tests and discovered it wasn't animal blood like she'd claimed. It was human. type B positive. They're still trying to match it to a victim to figure out who she was and where she went. I needed 18 stitches in my leg, and I walk with a limp when it rains. I don't stop for hitchhikers anymore, or for anyone stranded on the side of the road, no matter how desperate they look or how guilty I feel driving past. Because now, I know that sometimes the people who look like they need the help the most are the ones you should be running